In last week's video blog, I talked about meeting the former WWE Tough Enough runner-up Luke Robinson. Now, of course, that took place 3 years ago this week, on September 30th, 2011. But I also thought it would be fitting if I talked about my experience meeting the former WWE World Heavyweight Champion Daniel Bryan 4 years ago this week on October 1st, 2010. Basically the same weekend, just 1 year apart, but that was also a pretty tremendous experience, much more memorable than the Luke Robinson one, which was great in of itself. But meeting Daniel Bryan was also pretty surreal as well. And this was, of course, before he became World Heavyweight Champion. Like I said, this was 4 years ago, before he became World Heavyweight Champion, WWE Champion, before he headlined WrestleMania, all that stuff. So I'll break that down for you right now. It was announced in August of that year. And let's rewind a little bit further than that. It was in June of 2010 when Daniel Bryan was released from the WWE after he was unceremoniously fired after the actions of his during the Nexus angle on Raw in the June 7th edition of Monday Night Raw, People Power, whatever it was called, viewer's choice I think it was, when Daniel Bryan choked out announcer Justin Robertson, was fired a couple days later for his actions not being PG, spitting in the face of Daniel Bryan, all that kind of stuff. So he was fired from his contract that weekend, I think it was, and people were petitioning to bring back Daniel Bryan. I never really thought it was in the cards. And then he returned at SummerSlam. Now, of course, shortly before SummerSlam, I got an email. Now, of course, like I've said in my multiple videos in the past, I've talked about how I attend regularly Northeast Wrestling events, an indie organization up here in the Northeast, obviously. And Daniel Bryan was announced for one of the shows that I would be going to. It was originally supposed to take place in August under the stars outside, but it was moved to an indoor venue in, I believe, October 1st, 2010. And on the card was Daniel Bryan, like I said before, and this was only mere weeks before he was fired, before he was brought back by the WWE. He was slated to appear at the show, Shelton Benjamin. Also on that card would have been Mickie James versus Awesome Kong, later known as Karma in the WWE. Of course, that match would not come to fruition. I'll get to that in a minute. But all these big stars were lined up for the show. I was super excited for it. It was shaping up to be one of the best indie shows I've ever attended, and still to this day it is. It was so jam-packed, so star-studded of a lineup for this indie show. They have so many former big names from WWE and TNA. I was super excited for it. So shortly thereafter, we already buy our tickets. We're ready to go to the show. About 1 or 2 weeks after this all happens, after I get the email that Daniel Bryan will be appearing at the show, he returns to the WWE at the SummerSlam pay-per-view. Now, I'm so excited that Daniel Bryan's back. I was never really a big Daniel Bryan fan to begin with. Like when he first debuted on NXT, I was more of a Skip Sheffield guy, which is funny to say. I'm still a Ryback guy to this day. I liked Wade Barrett, not really Daniel Bryan. I didn't hate Daniel Bryan, I just was not really a Daniel Bryan fan. But I still wanted to meet him regardless. I mean, this is a guy that was partaking in one of my favorite angles of that year ever, I should say. The Nexus angle. He was there on night one. He was in the WWE only a few short months before this. So it would have been able to be cool to meet him. So when I heard he came back to the WWE at SummerSlam, I was so excited to see him back in the fold, especially since it came across as a genuine surprise that he'd be announced as the final and 7th member of Team WWE against Team Nexus at that year's SummerSlam event. Of course, that train wreck of a matchup with John Cena going over. I digress, but it was still cool to see Daniel Bryan back in the fold anyway. Now, of course, shortly thereafter he returned, I was kind of putting it into question whether Daniel Bryan would appear at this indie event. I figured now that he was back in the WWE, and some people will go on the record and say it was a work, they never fired him to begin with. If they didn't fire him to begin with, then why was he taking indie bookings that summer? You know what I mean? I'm of those people. I'm on the majority here and think that it was a real thing that happened, and it was a real thing that he was fired. He himself has said that on Chris Jericho's podcast before, and he knew in talking to Vince McMahon shortly after the incident occurred that he would be brought back, and he was at SummerSlam. I just didn't think that was plausible, and it happened. They proved me wrong. And he would also prove me wrong in other ways, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But anyway, I thought he would not be appearing at the indie event in October due to his status in signing back with the WWE. Thankfully, I was wrong in that sense as well. Never have been happier to have been wrong in that he would be appearing at the show. I'd still be able to meet him. And from what I know, his appearance at that Northeast Wrestling show on October 1st, 2010 was, if not the final date of his on the independent scene, or one of at least, one of his final indie dates that he had to fulfill before going back to WWE full-time. That was really cool. Technically, we were a part of history that night in seeing Daniel Bryan one last time on the indie scene before he went back to WWE as a full-time superstar. So that itself was very cool. So we get there October 1st, 2010. Like I said before, there were a lot of people there. I got to meet a lot of different superstars. Got to meet Finlay, Shelton Benjamin, Carlito was there. Robbie Stratus, not Robbie Stratus, his name was Rob Echoes at the time, of course now known as Robbie E. And we knew him from, the very first indie show that we ever went to as Rob Echoes, a Platinum Papa, as he used to be called. And he was signed by TNA like that week, and that was his final indie date for that time being. He was set to make his TNA debut, so to meet him was really, really cool. We had already met him before this, but to meet him on that night was pretty cool as well, to see him wrestle. So yeah, Carlita was there, Shelton Benjamin, Robbie E., Mickie James versus Awesome Kong, like I said before. That was a dream match, a WWE versus TNA dream match. And both, of course, by that point in time, both Mickie James and Awesome Kong had been respectively released from their WWE and TNA contracts. And they were set to meet on this show. Unfortunately, very shortly beforehand, shortly before the event, Karma, of course, that she would be called in WWE, would have to be pulled out of the event due to some health concerns or family emergency or something went wrong. She was unable to appear at the show. I was very disappointed. Mickie James was still there. She still signed autographs. It was cool meeting her. She was still in action, but I was disappointed that we had never gotten that Mickie James versus Awesome Kong match. And I still, to this day, don't think we have gotten that matchup. And of course, Karma would go to WWE as Karma, Awesome Kong, whatever. Mickie James would go to TNA. Mickie James has since left TNA, and Karma has since left WWE. So maybe we will see that match sooner rather than later. I know Mickie James just had a baby, so maybe not too soon. But hopefully at some point we will get that dream match and have it come to fruition. So that match was on the show. Also the main event would have been Daniel Bryan versus Shelton Benjamin. Now, before I get to the main event of this show, that spectacular main event and one of the best indie matches I've ever seen in my life, being there in person, that is, on sale that day, they had Stop the Necktie Violence t-shirts, and I probably should have worn it for this video, but stupid me. Anyway, though, they were selling Stop the Necktie Violence t-shirts, and anyone who knows has the insider scoop on the whole Nexus angle and him getting fired from the June 7th Raw, or shortly thereafter the June 7th Raw. It was because he was choking announcer Justin Roberts, like I said earlier, with his own necktie. They kind of made a mockery of it on the independent scene by selling t-shirts that said, Stop the Necktie Violence. And I never really thought to get one. I think I got something else that night, like another souvenir or whatever. And I got a nice poster board, like a commemorative poster of all the people that were at that show. That was pretty cool. Do not have that up here at school with me. But that was pretty cool as well. But I didn't really think to get one of those t-shirts, Stop the Necktie Violence, whatever. So that was pretty, looking back on it, I was disappointed that I didn't get it on that night. It would play a bigger role in the overall story, and I'll get to that in a minute as well. But main event that night, Daniel Bryan versus Shelton Benjamin. I don't think we had ever seen that match before that night. It was a great matchup. I do have that show on DVD. Northeast Wrestling puts all their shows out on DVD. It might be on their website now, I don't know. This was 4 years ago. But that was a great main event, a great night overall. Definitely one of the best indie events I've ever attended. But that's not the end of the story. Because like I said before, at this show they were selling Stop the Necktie Violence t-shirts, okay? So shortly afterwards, a friend that I had brought with me, Joe, who I'll probably mention, and you never know who is a wrestling fan, that series that I do here on the channel every few months. I'll probably talk about him at some point in that series and introduce you to him and stuff like that. But I had brought him to the show and a few other friends. But when he was at the show, a girl that he was talking to at the time, he texted a picture of that shirt to her. And I was already friends with this girl anyway. We were kind of making an inside joke from that point forward until I actually would graduate a couple of years later. 3 years we would make this into an inside joke that only her, I, and him, Joe, would understand. The whole Stop the Necktie Violence thing. So we would talk about that all the time. And I believe she went to Madame Tussauds Wax Museum or something like that. And I don't know if she was pulling my leg, and she probably was. She went there in Christmas vacation, a couple months after this whole thing ordeal went down, me meeting Daniel Bryan and all that kind of stuff. And he did not have his U.S. Championship that night, by the way. I talked about this in my Night of Champions review, but when I met him, actually he did have his Night of Champions. He did have his U.S. Championship. He had just won that U.S. title at Night of Champions right before this event that I met him at. And I'm kind of going all over the place here. But right before I met him, it was a few days before the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view. It was a couple weeks removed from when he won the U.S. Championship. Taking a picture with him was absolutely surreal, especially looking back at it now, considering he's one of the top stars in the company. Maybe not at the moment due to his injury and whatever. But he was holding the U.S. Championship. I think I have the picture. You'll see it in the thumbnail. I can't remember exactly, but he did have the belt with him because I asked him about it, and he had it in the bag behind him. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, though, this girl that I was talking about, this mutual friend between Joe and I, she had made a inside joke about this. We had always talked about, the whole Stop the Necktie Violence thing. No one would know what we were talking about. And she went to Madame Tussauds Wax Museum in New York and had looked for that t-shirt on the merchandise sale and had told me that she had found that shirt in the merch stand or something like that. And she had gotten back to me and said that it was in the merch stand. You got to go there. You got to buy it. why a Stop the Necktie Violence Daniel Bryan t-shirt would be at a wax museum at Madame Tussauds in New York, or I think she said it was at the Planet Hollywood or whatever. Why it would be there, I have no idea. But I was so excited about it because she specifically told me Madame Tussauds, so I went there only to buy that t-shirt. Madame Tussauds a couple months later. I was disappointed when I found out it was not on sale in the gift shop. I guess I really should not have been surprised, but it was not on sale, so I was pretty disappointed about that. And then she later changed her story and said it was on Planet Hollywood, not Madame Tussauds, blah, 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 blah. So she was probably pulling my leg, but even so, I was pretty disappointed about that. But regardless, we remained friends, all that kind of bullshit. And we kept that as an inside joke for the next couple of months, years, whatever, like I said, until I graduated. So fast forward about 5 or 6 months, almost exactly a year removed from when I met Daniel Bryan, actually at the event that I met Luke Robinson at that I talked about in last week's video blog if you want to check that out. They had on sale the Stop the Necktie Violence t-shirt. Now, of all the indie events that I went to in 2011, I went to maybe one or two before this. Actually, no, that was the first indie event that I went to in 2011. It was the shirt that said Stop the Necktie Violence on it, and it was the last one that they had left. And it was the, I believe in size large or extra large or something along those lines. It was the last one that they had on sale. And I figured, because I had not seen this t-shirt on sale at any other event that I had went to before this, and figured that this was my last chance to buy this t-shirt. So I figured I had to buy it. I bought it right then and there. I was almost convinced not to buy it, but my friend Joe, who I had also taken to that show when I met Luke Robinson, he was convincing me to buy, considering he was in on the inside joke. He understood. He wanted me to buy the t-shirt. I was very glad I did. I do have it to this day. I have it up here at school with me. I don't have it with me. Like I said before, I'm not wearing it. Stupid me. But I did end up getting possession of that t-shirt, and I have not seen any since. They probably sell them online somewhere, but I actually looked for them online at one point in between all of this, and I couldn't find it. They were all sold out. I was pretty disappointed. But in the end, I eventually did get that t-shirt. But anyway, going back to meeting Daniel Bryan, it was a surreal experience. Daniel Bryan, I mean, he is exactly the same way that you see him on TV. Very genuine guy, very nice guy. If you ever have the opportunity to meet him, and of course it's not as easy nowadays, that was when, I mean, he was in WWE at the time, but that was when he was still taking indie dates. And it's so much easier to meet a pro wrestler, a top-tier pro wrestler at an indie event. Granted, there's always a long line. There wasn't really a long line for Daniel Bryan. I mean, he was in the long list of superstars that included Mickie James, Finlay, Shelton Benjamin, all those kind of people. And Finlay, who, by the way, some kid went up to at that show and asked, how's your son Hornswoggle doing? He kind of rolled his eyes and laughed, faking the laugh there. It was pretty funny. But, yeah, even still, if you ever have the opportunity to meet Daniel Bryan, absolutely go for it. A really nice guy. I'm so lucky I was able to go to that show, buy that t-shirt a year later. And like I said before, from the day that he debuted in NXT, it might have been day one or some week after that, on the promo that he cut on NXT in 2010, I had no idea who he was. Of course, the internet was marking out that Bryan Danielson would be on NXT. I wasn't really an internet mark by that point, so I had no idea who this guy was from Ring of Honor or whatever. I had no clue of his background, so I wasn't really excited to see him in WWE. I didn't really care for him, I should say. And when he said that he would be one day main eventing WrestleMania for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, I laughed because I never saw him accomplishing that goal. It was great of him to have that goal. I just never really saw him as a main event guy. And thankfully, he would be proving me wrong later that year, winning the U.S. Championship, going on to win the Tag Team titles, the World Heavyweight Championship a little over a year later. So happy for his success. And, of course, going on to main event WrestleMania 30, one of the biggest WrestleManias and arguably the best WrestleMania of them all, for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. So like I said before, a surreal experience meeting Daniel Bryan. And if you ever get the chance to meet the bearded one, absolutely go for it. Really great guy. You will not regret it.